All right, let's start. So, hello. I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar of Learn with the Expert today. My name is Sebastian Lopez. I'm the founder and CEO of Jolt Digital. Let me give you a bit of context of why we launched Learn with the Expert. So we had two objectives in mind. The first one is to help people who were hit by layoffs. And we know there have been a lot of layoff waves last year, and this year it's even continuing. The second objective was to help brands and clients to know better what's happening under the hood. We call it knowledge transfer. So with all this in mind, I'm very pleased to welcome today Jonny Erazo. He's our expert. Jonny will answer a big question. Have algorithm killed organic social? Also, you will be able to find the full recording of today's webinar on our website, and also you'll be able to find the previous webinars in the same place on our website. So a big welcome to all of you and to Jonny especially for leading this session. We'll have a Q&A moderated by Jason towards the end of the webinar, so please write down your question and send them on the chat, and Jason will moderate that at the end of the session. So welcome, Jonny, over to you. Thank you.
Hi there, thanks everyone for joining. So as Seb obviously mentioned, when we first connected, I was actually looking for work, and I thought this was a fantastic initiative and was really keen to get involved. I've got some very good news though. During the time we've actually planned this and signed up and got everything moving, I've actually pleased to say that I've started a new role. So I'm now head of B2C marketing at Casio UK. So this is proof that there is light at the end of the tunnel. For those of you who are searching for work, or perhaps could have found yourself in a similar position, really exciting. This has been my first week, and it's great to still be a part of this initiative as well, and kind of give back and support what I think is a fantastic initiative and way of supporting people in positions like I was. So
well done, Jonny. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. And I also take the opportunity to invite people who were made redundant to also not hesitate to join us for future sessions, and see Jonny is a fantastic example of bouncing back and getting an amazing job. Well done.
Thanks. So a little bit about me before obviously Casio UK, which this being my first week. So I'm coming up to 14 years experience, both agency and in-house. A lot of my career has been really heavily focused on social and also integrated campaigns as well. I've worked across a whole range of different brands and verticals, from the likes of Nike, where I worked agency side at AKQA, American Express, the BBC, Michelin, Weetabix, New Era Cap, even worked with cat litter brands as well. So it's been a really kind of an interesting journey for me. And this particular topic, especially having focused so heavily on organic social, is something that's close to my heart, and also something that, a lot of people like myself who worked on the sort of the front lines of social have really had to come up against and kind of explore and look at different ways to sort of tackle the subject. So my previous role from this, I was an associate director at a UK independent comms agency. And as I say, it's really exciting to kind of be back in-house and bringing all that agency experience to kind of focus on one brand. But very much looking forward to talking you through this topic today. In terms of the agenda, so obviously this is intrinsic to the question that we're asking today. We're going to be looking at how social feed algorithms work, what are they, and what are their purpose? And then obviously the impact of these algorithms on your organic social reach. So I'm sure many of you will have found either through your personal pages or through the brands that you manage, you'll have noticed that over the recent years, particularly, reach may have dropped on some of the platforms that you post on. So this is really the heart of the question that we're going to kind of unpack today. And then, so what is the relevance and function of organic social today? So yes, we understand that obviously algorithms have had an impact on it, that feed reach is perhaps not as high as it once was. So unpacking it further, what actually, how can you use organic social and what is its role? So we're going to explore that some more. And then taking this all together, how can you take these learnings and actually utilize organic content as part of your holistic social strategy? And really the bigger question is, should you? Because it's something that's really is a hot topic at the moment. Lastly, we're going to open it up to the floor, have a bit of a discussion. This is, I'm going to leave you with some points that hopefully are food for thought, get you thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. So as I mentioned, today's topic really has been a big source of speculation in recent times, especially for anyone involved in comms or social. You've probably seen articles at some point or other in the last few years announcing the death of organic social media, or actually questioning whether it is dead. Ironically, some of these posts are actually posted via organic social media as well, which is interesting. That irony obviously isn't lost on me, but it is a big question. It's a really big statement, and it's something that I think is really important to tackle and look at. So look, as I say, there's no secret that organic reach has fallen on lots of social platforms. So, we're looking at example, we're taking Facebook as an example to start with. You can see the steady decline here from even 2016. In fact, it's probably even more than steady. It's quite a dramatic decline. So, they're talking about the fact that Facebook page with 10,000 followers may now only reach an average Facebook organic reach of 1%. So that could be, you've got 10,000 followers on Facebook, you post organically, that may only be 100 people who are actually seeing your content. So look, it's real. There's a real challenge behind the question. And again, just taking Facebook as an example, being obviously one of the most popular platforms on social media. Let's look at why this has happened. What's the reason for this sort of decline in reach? So really at the heart of this, platform algorithms are the cause. And I know this can be really frustrating for social media managers, people who own their own pages, because they're just not getting the reach that they once would have done on Facebook. But I think what's worth understanding here is there's a real rationale and a reason for why these algorithms are in place. And they play a really important role in platform health. So let's take it right back to Facebook's sort of infancy. When it first launched, when you posted on Facebook, it would reach people in a chronological order. So, all your friends and the pages you followed, you'd see probably most of their content, but you might also miss some of it because it would be pushed down the feed based on the time that it had been posted. So what this meant is that actually you may not have always been fed content that actually resonated with you. And as the platforms become increasingly popular, there's lots more noise on from brands. It's become really important for Facebook to kind of find a way to curate the content that's coming through from the pages that you follow and the users that you're connected with. So this is where the algorithm came in and became really important in the newsfeed. So as you can see, during Facebook's evolution, it's as the algorithms started to be implemented, the Facebook feed began prioritizing posts which it deemed to be more meaningful to you as a user. So how did it do that? It looked at the meaningful, what it deemed to be meaningful interactions. So things like commenting, likes, shares, and it attributed weights and scores to those interactions to see how much investment was used on the user's part as a way to gauge how interested they were in that post. So, for example, if I was particularly interested or engaged in a specific post that someone posted and I liked it or I commented on it, I'm more likely to see more of that content later. And really, this algorithm, as frustrating as it can be, has actually been really intrinsic in supporting the health and longevity of the platforms. So as much as it can be frustrating, it's also important to realize why it's there. So does this mean you should shift your investment to paid only? If you're only, if you're only reaching 1% of your audience, there is a legitimate, it's legitimate to question whether you should still be posting organically. So this is one of the things that I'm going to unpack today. And look, there's there are going to be lots of different answers to this question, lots of different opinions. This is mine, but it's based on experience, having worked with the brands that I have. And I'm also going to dig a bit deeper into this question as well, rather than just take it at face value. So my answer to this is a simple no, and I'm going to explain and unpack this a bit further. So 21% of people say that they don't believe the information in advertising is true if it's the only place that they see it. So yes, paid ads do work, they do convert, and they're effective. But if it's the only content that people are seeing, there is a risk that there's of cynicism and lack of trust around that message. So so the organic can play a role in kind of helping to build that trust and authenticity as well from your content. Another way to look at it as well is that your social feed is actually your shop window. So when you particularly on Instagram, so when someone comes to a social page, they want to see that it's populated. If it's populated, if it's got organic content, it gives them an incentive to follow. And like an empty shop window, it doesn't enhance your brand if there's nothing for people to see or engage with. And on top of that, it's also a way of rewarding the followers that you already may have as well, who are there. They do want to see organic content and they do want to see organic updates from your brand. And I think something worth keeping in mind, and look, we started with Facebook when we looked at examples, but not all platform algorithms are built the same. So yes, there are commonalities. They are driven by meaningful interactions largely. They are driven by engagement, but then nuances between the platforms and how that actually works. So when people are announcing the death of organic social, it's quite a large claim, and we need to look at all the platforms independently when we answer this. So we'll go into this a little bit further down the line. But what's interesting as well is the way that people interact with content. And I think, we've seen this in the news and media in terms of, talking about political echo chambers is actually affecting the way that people consume content and the kind of content that people are seeing that on a day-to-day basis. And I think LinkedIn is a really interesting one, particularly as we've seen a platform that was initially, quite corporate and played quite a corporate role and had quite a corporate voice, over time has actually lent more into kind of opinions and emotional and personal perspectives. And we're seeing more of this kind of content pop up on LinkedIn in recent times, driven by the fact that by the kind of content that people are engaging in. So this is, for me, it's been really interesting to watch this evolution and also see how the kind of content that people are engaging with gets amplified and has a sort of ripple effect on society and culture. So organic reach rate on the whole remains stronger on LinkedIn than Facebook. Probably not a massive surprise. As I said, you can see the dramatic decrease on Facebook. And I don't think will be any surprise to any social media managers who've got a Facebook page to see this. Instagram reach may have dropped, but statistically it's still ahead of Facebook and LinkedIn. So that, I think what Instagram particularly was one of the platforms that was very notable when the reach dropped, but it's actually perhaps still not dropped to the levels that we may have thought. The drop was just very dramatic to begin with because it used to have a very strong organic reach. And then, really looking at this question, looking at the kind of one of the front runners in terms of reach, TikTok actually averages an astounding 118% organic reach rate. So that means when you post on TikTok, you're actually reaching beyond your own audience a lot of the time as well. And as a new brand or person on the platform with an account, you can actually start to reach quite healthy numbers from zero. So again, when we're announcing the death of organic social media, that this definitely isn't the case for TikTok. So look, we can see that organic content can still reach people, but the important thing is you just need to make the content work harder and be more tactical and understand the kind of things that are driving interaction or meaningful interaction, if you like, and understand your audience. So you need to understand your audience even better. So look, as we've seen, organic social still regularly gives birth to trending memes and topics. So some examples here that I'm sure many of you might be familiar with: men thinking about the Roman Empire, girl math. These are all kind of memes in recent times that have really spread like wildfire, and a proof that organic content can still reach people. And it's really about what content resonates with the users and what people relate to. And ultimately, you know, social media is called social media for a reason. It's all about relatability. So we look at these two examples here. Yes, they've, you know, largely been spread by sort of communities rather than brands, but it can still happen with brands. So an example in recent times, and yeah, it did divide opinions, was Weetabix's baked bean post, which was retweeted over 100,000 times. It got people talking, it got press, and it made Weetabix during the time of the tweet, you know, really top of mind for people, and would have raised certainly brand awareness and discussion. So whether or not it was brand enhancing might, you know, is one question, but it did reach, and it did actually reach people, and it got Weetabix talked about, which, if that was the objective, was very successful. Another example, ASOS went viral with an organic tweet recruiting a troll Tinder user as a brand model. So, and this is something that actually people don't, you know, when you're announcing the death of organic social, sometimes it's easy to overlook the role that community management can play in driving posts viral. So this is a perfect example of it. It's a perfect example of community management being reactive and really relevant, and understanding the audience and the situation. And also what it relies on is brands being very nimble and being able to move quick, and different teams and departments working together in unison to make something like this happen. And again, this tweet created lots of press and buzz way beyond even social. So again, by thinking strategically, being fast and reactive and meaningful, you really can make organic content work harder. But we focused on owned media to begin with, but actually one of the keys to, you know, to organic reach is actually the power of third parties, and they play a really important role in this. And I think increasingly, as reach has dropped on some of these platforms, it's increasingly a way for brands to kind of look beyond this and really optimize their reach and the kind of audiences that they're speaking to. So a great example of this was iPhone, and you've probably seen this campaign Shot on iPhone, where users submitted photos which were shot on iPhone using the hashtag Shot on iPhone, and they were then blown up on out-of-home billboards, and obviously this helped incentivize people actually sharing that UGC. In fact, it drove 29 million organic hashtag mentions. So this is a really great example, not only of out of home and social working together in unison, amplifying one another, but also of the power of UGC. If you can create a really strong incentive for people to share content, then actually your fans and your audiences can be your ambassadors as well. And there's no one better to promote your products than your fans. So this is, I think, an example of a really powerful campaign that also demonstrates that organic social, again, can be particularly effective, but it's just a case of working tactically. And I think the use of out of home here was particularly clever in amplifying that. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that native features such as Instagram collab posts can also help you get in front of more eyes. So there have been a lot of fairly recent updates to platform functionality, which again are worth keeping in mind if you want to reach more people. And the power of collab posts is that you can team up with somebody who has a synergy with your brand, or perhaps has a specific audience that you'd like to, you know, target or connect with more effectively. So you can essentially post the post out and hit both audiences. And I think this is something that brands really need to take advantage of more as well, during a time where algorithms really can pose a little bit of a struggle. And on top of this as well, any native features that drive engagement, you know, we talked about the fact that meaningful engagement is what drives algorithms, but any native features that drive engagement can really position you favorably with the algorithm. So we've got a few examples here. We touched on LinkedIn earlier. LinkedIn polls, for example. Again, if you're posting a meaningful poll, something that you think is going to resonate with your audience, and people are compelled to hit, you know, an answer, it's going to help drive that engagement. It's going to help your algorithm. Again, we've got the example of Instagram stickers, sticker polls. Again, very useful. And it's all ultimately, it's about driving value to your audience, because what's valuable for your audience is what they're going to interact with, and what they'll interact with is ultimately going to help your algorithm. So at the end of the day, it really, you know, look, the algorithms have changed, the reach and you know, the nuances in these algorithms do continue to change. But the most important principle underpinning all of this is about creating timely, relevant content that engages. And as I say, it drives value. You know, you're creating content for your audience, but through the lens of your brand. And it's important to think holistically. So we touched on, you know, owned versus earned media, but also paid plays a role in all of this as well. And it's important to recognize that. And really, and I think this is, you know, this is the case for marketing as a whole. It's really the sweet spot is somewhere between all of these different tactics, and making sure that you're really building a full picture and telling a full brand story, and ultimately driving supporting consumers at every stage of the funnel. So as I say, it's important to use paid as a tactical lever. Paid has a really important role still, but it isn't an entire strategy. If you base your entire strategy around paid, there's going to be potentially a lot of brand storytelling opportunities that you could lose, and also the opportunity to connect with your audience in a meaningful way, and you know, support them across that entire funnel, as I say. So with this, I'd recommend using an always-on organic drumbeat. Keep that relevance, authenticity, and as I say, reward those existing fans. They're there for a reason. They're there. They've hit follow because they want to see content from you. Whilst exploring ways to amplify your reach authentically through third parties. So, as I say, I think this is increasingly important. It can be brand enhancing as well, and it can tell your brand story through the eyes of different people, which can again add to the credibility of the stories that you're telling, add to the credibility of your message, and really give new perspectives and make that content much more interesting, and as well as reaching specific target audiences that you may not usually reach. By doing this, you'll strike a balance between short-term conversion and long-term loyalty. It's very easy to get into a trap of just chasing metrics and looking at that bottom funnel conversion. But ultimately, by having a blend of all these different elements, and you know, looking at owned, earned, and paid, and you know, organic all together, you have an opportunity to build that long-term loyalty and have people really buy into your brand story. So algorithms, as I say, they may have changed, but the principles underpinning effective content remain the same. And arguably, I think they'll continue to remain the same. It's all about understanding your audience and understanding what resonates with them. And I think this is a really interesting kind of last message to leave it on, is that actually without organic content, social platforms would cease to be social. So as I said earlier, organic content plays a really important role in keeping users active on the platforms, right? Your everyday users aren't necessarily using paid, right? So to keep them active on the platform, they need to be reaching people as well. So if you've got an active audience of organic users, you've also got naturally got a pool of people that you can reach via paid. So the two are very much sort of reliant on one another. And I think it is within the platform's interest to make sure that organic social is very much alive. So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say, obviously, algorithms play a really critical role for user experience. They're there for a reason. Before we all get frustrated that our post hasn't reached enough people, we need to understand why that is. Organic social, it's not dead, but it does need a lot of extra work, and particularly on certain platforms. And you need to look at it on a platform by platform basis before you jump in and just assume that it's dead on every platform. It isn't, but adapt your channel strategy based on that algorithm and the nuances on every platform. Ensure a holistic strategy that blends owned, earned, and paid. As I say, this, it will vary depending on your brand, on your position in the market, what the ratio of these things are for your brand. But ultimately, you want to try and blend all of these three things together. And use paid as a tactical lever. And I've said here, where paid really can play an important role is in terms of campaign spikes, BAU awareness, and those lower funnel messages. It can do all of these things tactically, but if you're just there putting money into every single post, you're not going to get bang for your buck. You want to be tactical. So within, you've got always on or drumbeat, as I say, but then you use paid for those tactical spikes. And lastly, really, and this is the big takeaway, is just continue to focus on creating engaging, value-driving content. And I think with this, it's worth bearing in mind, one of the questions is probably, well, what is good content? Ultimately, only you can answer that. And that really is down to your brand and what resonates with your audience. And the answer to that really is in your metrics quite often. So reporting is really important in understanding what content is right for you, alongside your wider brand strategy as well. So there isn't a one size fits all. Some content may be right for some brands, some content may not be right for others, but you want to hit the sweet spot between your brand DNA and what resonates with your audience. To finish it off, I'm now going to open it to the floor. What questions do you guys have?
Thank you, Jonny. Thanks for the half an hour. Really interesting content. I love the fact that we've got a lot of lines for bumper stickers. Like, without organic content, social platforms will cease to be social. I love that. Yeah. Any questions from the floor?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So there are products online, right? And I have been served one of the ads. It's called Puff Social. So Puff Social, what it intends to do and what it claims to do is that it will be able to connect you with users around the world, genuine users, that will help you to make your content go viral, or rather get people sharing it, and people to promote your profile, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, that sort of thing. So Puff Social is one of them. There are others that I tried last year, and most of them are fraud. So why does this kind of platform exist?
That's a really good question, Carol. So I think it again, and I think this is actually born out of the frustration that people have. And I think where you find frustration is often where you find new business. People jumping in to solve problems and try and provide a quick fix to something that's perhaps a more complicated question, right? So I think, yes, it's worth being skeptical of this. And a great example of this is actually when we looked at people buying followers. So in the early days, one of the important metrics on social that people looked at, or I say important, is one of the ones that people kind of looked at first, was follower numbers. And actually, over time, we've realized that to a degree, this is a vanity metric, because if you've got a massive audience that isn't actually engaging, then you're actually not perhaps driving the value and moving the dial in the way you want it to. So the whole thing of buying followers, of bots, it's a really big topic, and I think this is an extension of that as well. And with it, I'd be very skeptical of platforms that try and provide you with a quick fix, a quick answer, because ultimately, as I say, you'll be the best placed people to understand what resonates with your audience, and there's no quick fix for getting organic reach or even paid as well. There needs to be a robust strategy behind anything paid too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
I think Angela, you have a question.
Hi, Johnny. I work for an NGO where social media flexibility and agility is not our forte because there's a lot of bureaucracy that comes into these things. How do you suggest we stay relevant with social media and being able to capture our audience while also benefiting from the algorithm without being able to do all of these agile things that maybe other organizations are able to do?
That's a really good question, Angela. Yeah, it's an interesting one because actually a lot of the moments, you know, and during my career, a lot of the moments that have looked the most spontaneous have actually been the most planned. Nike, I think, was a great example where when we did reactive content for sports moments, we'd have actually 2 different posts set up depending on what the outcome would be. And this would have been planned perhaps weeks or months in advance of the actual moment. So in the moment, it looked very spontaneous, but actually there was a lot of planning behind it. And I think this is something that it's a bit of the smoke and mirrors behind some of these seemingly spontaneous moments. There is actually a lot of planning. So what I'd say, there is an element of planning to be spontaneous, yes. And I think it's all about your strategy as well, and leaving some room in for nuance, some room in for flexibility, and having trust in your community managers and your decision makers to sometimes to make those quick decisions. But what I would stress is that a lot of these spontaneous moments often aren't as spontaneous as they may appear, and you really often need to plan to be spontaneous, or actually even write spontaneity into your strategy through the way that the infrastructure and the way that you sign things off. So but with that, if you can't move fast, it may just be the case that it is what it is, and you may want to focus on more kind of evergreen or BAU kind of topics. There's no harm in that. You don't have to jump, and this is the other thing I think for brands as well. There's certainly a feeling and a pressure that people have to jump on every single trend that's popping up the minute it pops up. And the simple answer is you don't. The most important thing is that you're true to your brand, and you can still comment on relevant topics that aren't necessarily transient.
I thought that was a really good answer. Thank you so much, Johnny.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? So maybe I'll add on something to your answer, Jonny. There are so many ways to publish organic content, right? There are like feed, there are like stories. So when you look at developing an organic social strategy, how will you decide what to use and when, how, any best practice?
This is the really interesting thing, and it kind of comes back to the thing as I was saying about one size fitting all. One size doesn't fit all for brands, but also it doesn't fit all for platforms as well. And as we've seen, platforms are constantly developing, constantly evolving, and this is why it's really worth, when a new feature comes up, it's worth understanding how it works and also how you can make the most of it. So I think a good example here is, for example, Instagram stories versus Instagram feed, right? So stories, we're talking about transitory reactive moments, again, to sort of Angela's point. Stories are great for that because they're obviously, the content's up for 24 hours, and also it can be a really good sort of lower funnel link driver as well. So you've got the opportunity to put a link on a story, which you can't do within a feed post. So for Instagram, you could say that okay, right, my reactive, my sort of in the moment spikes or click driving is going to be done through stories, and my content, which has a little bit more longevity, is perhaps more of a longer term sort of brand message, sits in feed. So this is something that is really worth considering within your strategy. So often we think of strategies just in terms of platforms, but actually functionality is a big part in that as well, and it's worth bearing in mind things like the explore function on Instagram as well, trying to appear in that explore feed. If your content does really resonate with people and appears there, it's likely to again reach more eyeballs. Hi, Stefan.
Thanks, Jonny.
Hey, great speech. Really appreciate it. I have a question regarding the split between how much you put towards the creation of the material versus the buys itself, the placement.
Is that, are you talking in terms of paid?
Well, how much? I put it in context. I measured ad efficiency for years. I measured brainwaves for years, and it's shown that if the ad is perceived as high quality, 500% uplift compared to low quality.
Right.
500% is huge. Also, once you have gained someone's attention and tell a story with repeated messages in the same context line, you win. It's almost impossible just to break in with a new story each time. You know, there's so much clutter, you don't reach through. So in that context, most people spend far too little on the creatives rather than just relied on the spread. So I just want to hear your opinion on.
It's no, I agree to a great extent, definitely, because it is easy. Again, it's this kind of lower funnel mentality of just focusing purely on that immediate ROI, right? Let's keep the costs down and drive the clicks up. But actually, a lot of the clicks are going to be reliant, as you say, Stefan, on the quality of the actual content. I think with that, there's a caveat though. For some brands, actually, premium content actually doesn't necessarily engage as much, or it may not feel quite as right. Particularly, again, this is down to the nuance of where the post is posted. So Instagram stories, for example, lends itself to slightly less, well, sort of more lo-fi, off-the-cuff kind of content, right? So when you're talking about a placement like that, yes, that can work. But I do agree, Stefan, that investment can definitely enhance. But it's also about the quality of the storytelling. It's about the message that you're getting across. Does it resonate with people? So I feel like there's a whole mix to it, and it's as much about the amount of investment as it is the quality of the story and the relevance of it for your audience.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions on the floor?
I have one last question. So, for example, right, for brands who do not have access, because at the end of the day, when you create content, especially on TikTok, you must know what is the trending topic, the trending music to use. So, for example, for some brands who do not have any access to this sort of tools to understand what is trending, how do they go about to create a content that that can go viral without having to rely on paid media?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Carol. And again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about this kind of increasing pressure for brands to sort of jump on every single trend that's popping up. And I think there is a definite sort of peer pressure in the industry to feel like you have to. And it might be that not every trend that pops up is actually, relevant for your brand to comment on as well. It's all about being selective, and ultimately, yes, I think, they can play a role, but there's also, I think there's an easy trap to fall into, again, of just chasing metrics, chasing reach, jumping on trends. And I think you need to think about what's enhancing for your brand as well. It's easy to jump on a topic for the sake of it, but actually, is it going to enhance your brand in the long term and the message and the strategy, your brand strategy? That's really has to take equal weighting there. So to answer your question, I mean, I think it all goes back to your audience. If you're focusing on what you think and you understand your audience and you're looking at your audience insights and you're focusing on what interests them, then that's ultimately the most important thing. If you can't jump on those trends, and as I say, you don't have to jump on those trends. There's no pressure. It's about really staying focused on the messages that you want to convey with your brands and keeping audience in mind with that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.